What up, world? What's going on with y'all? Just wanted to check in and do something. I wanted to pay a lot of homage and respect to somebody that I didn't think that I would actually have this perspective about. Drewski. I think that usually, especially from my perspective, I always looked at Drewski as like a very funny internet comedian. I like some of his skits. He's goofy, funny, but I've never really taken him serious. I never really looked at some of the characters that he played as thought-provoking characters. But I realized that some of those characters are thought-provoking to the people who see those characters in an everyday light. And this week, I think that his mega church skit probably is going to be his most viral perspective, but it's the most relatable to people in, I guess, on my algorithm. And I think that real comedy is about truth. And I think that's why he's always been able to be relatable, and people repost him, and people want to be around or see more of his work, more of his art and his collection of comedy, because everything that he does has a truth factor to it. Whether you agree with it or not, it's a very well documented, almost in a journalism type way of recreating people and characters that like people that you actually have been around. And it's kind of, I think that's what makes comedy good. How well can you create a character that I've never met you and you've never met me, but you know my cousin, you know my brother. And in this thing, it's like, it feels like some people are going to be upset because it seems like Drewski knows their pastor. And we as a culture as a religion, I'm from North Carolina, where I'm in the Bible Belt, where we don't play about religion in the sense that you're not allowed to talk about things even though they're right in front of you. As a person who has been ostracized from a church for doing good, I can honestly tell you that there are a lot of times where it is very plain black and white in front of you that a pastor or a leader is taking advantage of his people. And I've been in church meetings where people have called me the bad guy for pointing it out. And it's crazy. It's mind blowing that people who can go to different churches across the country in different places from different backgrounds can all have a similar perspective over a pastor who is overly dressed, per se, meaning spending way too much money on clothes, who's spending way too much money on production, who seems to be only about the ability to make money and grow the church, but not necessarily too concerned with his individual members, is crazy. And I think that for the first time, because it's something that's relevant to my perspective, I really had to give Drewski a round of applause, because somebody's got to respond. I think everybody should tune into a mega church, whether you watch church online or not, because every mega church got an online. They got an online giving, they got an online platform. Should definitely check in and see how these pastors respond. I seen recently that 50 Cent called out a certain podcast of rappers because they hadn't paid rent. And all of them responded, or a lot of them responded with diss tracks. I don't know if you can respond to not paying your rent with a diss track. If so, let me know, because I want to do that for my apartment complex as soon as possible. So I think, and people said that 50 Cent had to respond to that. Why do I have to respond to the facts that you owe me money with a diss track? I don't need to diss you. I need my money. And I think that in the same breath that people said that 50 needed to respond, I think that we should ask the mega church pastors, these guys who make thousands of dollars a week for motivational speaking, we should ask them what they think of the Drewski perspective. Because I've grown in churches where pastors used to talk down about the mega church appeal, and then I watched those same pastors try their best to appeal to the masses in the same way. And I'm not saying that I'm against religion or I'm against pastors doing what they need to do to guide their people, but there has to be a time where we acknowledge that it is a cultural phenomenon right now, these mega churches that don't seem to be about the people, and they're more about the welfare of their own pockets. And I think that this Sunday we should get a response. We should see what people think about that. We should see what other pastors have to say about that, because all comedy, real comedy, is about truth. The thing that makes it funny is because it's a very obvious elephant in the room, and a real comedian is willing to point it out. And if while we're here to talk about it, you have to understand, or you have to be willing to hear a perspective, disagree with it, and then see about how much truth is in that perspective. Because there's a lot of people who they hate when you say anything against religion, but they don't really understand that religion, no matter what religion it is, no matter who you consider as God, religion is probably the most elementary level of spirituality you can have. It's foundational. It's just learning your ABCs of spirituality. It's learning how to have faith. It's learning how to have discipline. It's learning how to have a perspective of God. It's the 1 + 1 = 2 of spirituality. And once you graduate from the elementary level, you start to realize that spirituality has many more avenues. There's more than one way to tap in with God. There's more than one way to see the God in yourself. And that's kind of like the equivalent of finding out in middle school that you can put letters in your math problems. When you get to 1x + 3, 5 equals, and then you get to high school where they have the imaginary numbers and the log and cosine and geometry, and you realize that this religion, your God, can't be put into, if he's is so amazing and is so omnipotent, it can't be put into one book. It can't be put into one perspective. There's got to be a little bit of room for us to grow past just the religious aspect of it. And you have to be willing to have that conversation with yourself. It's not for you to try to find it in a comedian or find it in a pastor. But when you really sit down with yourself, are you able to see through the BS? Are you able to see through people who are more so out for themselves than they are for the general welfare or well-being of other people? And just because a person has a title, whether it's a teacher, a pastor, a friend, brother, sister, mother, that does not mean that they cannot be humanly flawed, and that their perspective and their actions may not be the most forthcoming and positive, I guess you could say. Before Drewski's video dropped, I was having a conversation with my mother and my brother and his fiance about a pastor, I think he's from Atlanta, whose wife wore this like crazy Met Gala style ball to a fundraiser, and it created a controversy, and he spoke about it at church. And I was like, when did pastors start jumping into the beef of my wife is the most scantily dressed woman in the room? Like, wow. He said I picked out the dress and all. And it's like, so when pastors start distracting the people? Like, when did it become cliche to say something about the way that the pastor's wife was dressed at church? I thought that was supposed to be the first lady. And from what I know about church, from what I know about church, the first lady is supposed to be the example that all the women in the church kind of look up to. Not saying that they have to be her, but the first lady, you know, she's gonna come with the dress past the kneecap, she's gonna be covered up, she's gonna have a hat on. She's gonna teach you how to be a woman of God and how to follow and submit and be, you know, reserved and demure. That's what the first lady was for, that I thought. And then it was like, when I seen the dress, I'm like, it's not a bad dress. If she was an Instagram model, it's not a bad dress. If she was the wife of a rapper, but we shouldn't have the wife of a retired NFL player look like the first lady at the same time. Like, that's not saying that you're not allowed to embrace your body, your femininity, and your sexuality. But as the first lady of the pastor of a mega church, who, you know, there's got to be some kind of level or some kind of balancing act. And maybe you express yourself with your clothes, but what are you expressing besides sex and being a sex symbol with your husband? And I feel like as a black man, I want my wife to show off, but I also don't put myself in a position to be in charge of a whole church. I don't come off as a religious leader, because we looking at religious leaders like pastors as an example. And I think that we need to ask our pastors, we need to ask our leaders, black leaders, cultural leaders, to be more of an example that we can honestly follow, because it seems like they embrace the follows just as much as their congregation. They like the likes, they like the social media celebrity just as much as the teenagers do. And I think that we really need to draw or have some conversations and ask these people in charge, are you here for the betterment of society and our people, or are you here to make a dollar? And if you're here to make a dollar, just say that. We can figure out a level. And I think that really they are just saying that. I think that if you listen to a tithing call, if you listen to an offering call, they're telling you, I'm here for the dollar. The church operates off the dollar. The church does not operate off faith. It does not operate off of people being here for the well-being of the sick and the shut-in and the widows and the children. We operate off of cash capitalism, just like the country we in. And if we're gonna be in that perspective, if we're gonna be in that space, we need to ask more of our people. We need to ask more of our culture than not let people keep taking advantage and being culture vultures of our spirituality and our religion. Because if you continue to let it happen, it's only getting worse. And it's only gotten worse. Because people remember before we had these mega churches, it was still a thing. So I think that Drewski is about to take on another role that we've been needing for some of these people to have conversations that are uncomfortable.